Hello there, everyone. How you doing today? I hope you're all well. Today we're going into r/entitled people, where we are going to be reading a story where OP's parents gave every single birthday of his and every single important event over to his sister. If you enjoy the stories I have to give to you, remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below with your thoughts. Now, without further ado, let's get started, shall we? Parents made every single birthday about my sister for the last 8 years. I'm 18 this year, and recently got on my own from my parents. I have a sister about 10 years younger than me. She was an unplanned pregnancy and nearly didn't make it to term. I don't know how many of the details of how rough my mother's second pregnancy was, since I was never told much. But I do know that it was so hard on her body that my mother could no longer have kids after my sister was born. She was in and out of the hospital repeatedly that year. My mother almost didn't survive the birth either. It made her and my father latch on to my little sister because she could have potentially never been born. And since then, I felt like I was just the other kid in the house. Except for when they needed me as a free babysitter, of course. The level of favoritism my parents showed long term has me believing they were genuinely sick in the head for not noticing what it was they were doing to me. And now it's rebounding on them, which I'll explain here. Starting with my 11th birthday, my parents wanted to let my sister blow out my candles because she was 2 years old, and cried at the sight of a birthday cake that wasn't hers. I didn't want to do it, but my parents forced me into it. They relit the candle for me to do it again after her, but the moment felt completely ruined. The same thing happened next year, and the year after that, and so on so forth. They just kept forcing it until it became the norm. My sister had to have presents on my birthdays as well. I never got any on hers either, and when I asked why, they just told me that I'm a boy, and boys don't need to worry about it as much. I know I was a kid, but did they really think that was a smart thing to say? Not really. And my parents would always choose a place my sister would like to be at more than me on my own birthday. Eventually, it became more like my sister was getting 2 birthdays a year, and I got none. Beyond this, my parents made their entire lives revolve around my sister. If there's something I wanted to do, my sister had to want it to do it too. Otherwise, it was vetoed, unless I could do it alone. I learned to just lock myself in my room with my video games because they didn't seem to bother me there. Unless my sister wanted to come running in to annoy me, hence why I put a lock on my door. My parents wanted me to remove it, but I freaked out because I was an angry teenager who was tired of being intruded on at any given time. My sister came running in on my own room when I had no clothes on, and my parents were upset at me for being naked in my own room. When I pointed out how ludicrous that was, they withdrew their objection and just let me keep the lock. My sister developed quite the princess complex because of how she was being spoiled on a daily basis, and she was very demanding, so I stayed away from her as much as I feasibly could. Whatever excuse I could use to not have to deal with her, even if I had to make stuff up just to have time to myself. My parents hired a teen girl babysitter, and I got more personal time. And then the babysitter quit because my sister wouldn't listen to her, and my parents tried to keep from paying by saying she did a bad job. The girl got some other people involved, and my parents finally paid what they owed her. Then they hired another girl to babysit on the regular, and this one stayed, but my parents made it clear that I was to be watching my sister any day I had free, which I went out of my way to make busy as my part-time job as I could. My sister treated me as her personal butler and ordered me around. She even had a stupid nickname for me she wouldn't stop using. Just hearing that nickname makes my blood boil. And if I didn't give her everything she wanted, she'd cry and call our parents. And then I'd be in trouble for mistreating her, quote unquote. We had many massive arguments because of this, and after I refused to yield anymore, my relationship with my parents devolved into barely any words spoken between us for some time. And yet, during my high school graduation, they had the nerve to brag to other parents that they were the reason I worked so hard. Well, they weren't wrong, but the reason they were thinking of was not the one that actually happened. I worked hard, just biding my time for when I'd be free, but my parents acted like they'd done so much. Maybe they did before my sister was born, but afterwards it was all about her. They didn't even ask me about school until parent-teacher conferences came up. I graduated with a B&C average, and after my graduation, my parents just took me to some place where my sister would always have more fun than me, even though the trip was supposed to be for me. On my 18th birthday in July, though, things really boiled to the surface. Even though it was my 18th, it didn't feel like it was about me at all. I hoped to God that we were going to go to my favorite restaurant for once, but no. They had the party at the local knockoff Chuck E. Cheese, which is only the place like it nearby to us, so it was the de facto celebratory destination whenever anything big was achieved, including my high school graduation. I did say it was a place my sister would enjoy more than me. I was surrounded by kids half my age having parties, and I was so bored with nothing to do but eat mediocre pizza and play claw machines and dated arcade games for tickets to cheaply made prizes that brought me no joy. Then when it was my time for cake, my parents came out with one that was pink, with white flowers on it. Sure, it had my name on it, but it was very obviously not a boy's cake, and there was only 10 candles. My parents lit the candles and set it right in front of my sister to blow out. And that's when it happened. I just had this mental moment of all this pent-up hate mentally flashing before me. And then I just started ugly crying. I, an 18-year-old boy, was crying in front of the whole family. Everyone was so shocked that time just seemed to freeze. I got up, and all the stuff I'd been holding out in for the past 8 years just spilled out like word vomit. The entire family got to be witness to this event, and when it was finally over, I just walked outside to sit by the family car. Several relatives trailed out after me to say they were sorry, and that they didn't know about the pink cake because my parents kept it covered till it was served. I said it didn't matter that they didn't know. They all sat back and watched as my life was taken over by Little Miss Sunshine for the past 8 years. I had no real birthdays or celebrations of my own. They were all about her. And then, on my biggest birthday of my life, they all expected me to just smile and nod like always, while they handed my sister a cake that was entirely meant for her when it wasn't even her birthday. Some of them started giving me apologies, but they made the excuse that all this time they just thought I was okay with it because my parents said I was. I told them I was never okay with it, and my parents forced it on me every year till I just pretended to accept it. I spread my arms out and said, "Look where we were. Does it look like the place I wanted to celebrate my graduation and 18th birthday?" No one even tried to stick up for me all this time. I'm just the other kid while my sister gets everything. I didn't even get to have any of my friends there because my parents stopped letting me invite them long ago after they tried to voice their opinions over my sister getting to blow out the candles. There are 365 days a year, and was it so bad to want one that was about me and not her? Instead, I'm treated like the greedy, entitled brat for wanting my own birthday. And then I just went back to ugly crying. My father came outside by that point to yell at me for making such a huge scene, because my mother was crying too. My sister was upset because I ruined her moment, and now everyone in there who saw thinks they're bad parents. I ended up yelling at them that they are bad parents, and they should know exactly why. Well, after I said that, the rest of the family descended on him like a pack of wolves. Better late than never, I suppose. But I'd never seen anything like it before. My father was practically backed right up to the restaurant front door, and most of the crowd flooded back inside with him to have it out with my mother, too. My grandparents stayed with me and apologized for having their eyes shut so tight for so long. I don't know what was said to my parents in the restaurant, but it was roughly a half an hour before they came out. And when they did, they looked incredibly defeated. My mother was still sniffling after crying so hard, and neither of my parents could look me in the eyes. They both awkwardly apologized for what they did, and offered to redo the party elsewhere. But that really wasn't enough for the crowd. One of my uncles ahemed rather loudly, and my parents said they'd never made me let my sister blow out the candles again, or give her presents on my birthday, or make any part of it about her. There was another ahem, and my parents also apologized for getting a cake that was obviously not even meant for me, and that they just felt like I wasn't worried about cake anymore at my age. Whoo boy, was that the wrong thing to say. I became furious all over again, and yelled at them that my age was irrelevant. They had literally given my birthday to my sister, and had no good reason as to why, and they knew it. I then said there was no point in redoing the party, because it's too damn late. They clearly showed that I mean nothing to them. They ruined 8 years of my life until I became an adult. What future birthdays with them could I possibly look forward to? Well, my father started to get angry at me for saying that, but when the entire family yelled at him, he shut up. My grandfather told him I'm exactly right, and there is no possible way he can undo the damage done now. He said my parents were awful people, played favorites, and treated me like a black sheep ever since my sister was born. And what's more, they were all awful themselves because they just let it happen too. And I'm owed far more than an apology. I was owed my life back. My mother just broke down again and tried to come closer while crying my name and apologizing. I refused to let her anywhere near me, and half the family body-blocked her from getting close. I just said I couldn't take it anymore and started to walk away. One of my aunts chased me down and brought me back. I could hear multiple family members yelling and cussing at my parents over what happened. But I was so upset. I couldn't even feel happy for any bit of justice after all this time. Also, where was my sister when this was all going on? She was still in the restaurant all by herself, eating cake and ripping open presents that were all meant for me. And if anyone was wondering, yes, my parents served her some cake after I cried and walked out. You'd think doing that wouldn't be their primary focus in the moment, but they were called out on it later. My grandparents got me to calm down and sit in their old minivan while everyone else cleared out the party. My sister threw a huge tantrum after being caught opening my presents, one of which was a brand new smartphone that she threw against the wall and broke because she wasn't allowed to keep it. She literally just got a brand new phone on her own birthday a few months earlier. I ended up being so upset that I was ranting that I never wanted to celebrate my birthday again, and my grandparents let me stay the night over at their house. When I came home, I still didn't want to speak to my parents. My mother just kept crying because I wouldn't talk to her, and my father was as closed-mouthed as me. The following weekend, my parents convinced me to go out with them to dinner, and when we got there, I was surprised to find a whole new party waiting for me. My parents were there, and they kept up with this having, "Don't hate us," smile on their face the entire time. There was a big chocolate cake with 18 candles on it, and there was even a banner with my name. They called it my happy belated graduation birthday party, because I didn't really get either this year. I did kind of have to pretend to be happy. One good party doesn't undo 8 years of favoritism, or even make a dent in it, really. And where was my sister? She was sitting at the table with her arms folded and lip curled, because it wasn't all about her like it used to be. And rather than sing happy birthday for me, they sang an altered birthday version called Happy Day. Then as soon as I blew out my candles, my sister screamed. I mean an ear-bleedingly loud little girl scream. My parents had to rush her out, and then bring her back in later, looking more upset than ever. She quietly pouted in her seat for the rest of the party. I did still get a new smartphone as well, and my sister got hers taken away, among other things for what she did at the prior party. But the smartphone wasn't all. The whole family had chipped in and gotten me a car. It was just an old white Volvo, but I loved it the moment I laid eyes on it. My grandfather knows a thing or two about cars and fixed it up himself. I was so happy, but my sister clearly was not, because she let out another one of those screams. She started having a massive tantrum and demanding a car too. My mother had to take her into the bathroom, and they didn't come back out for a while. My father just went back to looking defeated. My sister had effectively ruined their attempt at trying to look good in front of the whole family. Multiple family members also had strong words for my parents, that my sister was acting that way because they raised her to be a spoiled princess brat. I obviously started driving the car around right away, but only days later my sister actually vandalized the car by taking a hammer and breaking 2 of the side windows and cracking the windshield to the point the car was undrivable. My parents managed to stop her before she did any more damage, but she screamed bloody murder when they grabbed her and took the hammer away. Then she tried to bite them. Oh, everyone was furious with my sister, especially my grandparents, because my grandfather had put so much work into the car, and my sister ruined it while having a massive tantrum. My grandparents had spoiled my sister so badly that she couldn't mentally comprehend that I could have something she couldn't. And several other family members laid into my parents about how they were setting my sister up for failure by making her an entitled brat that expects the world to be given to her. And she's going to have a terrible adult life because they won't put down their feet and teach her some respect. Well, her actions didn't go unpunished. My sister was grounded for the rest of the summer, and effective the new school year was sent to boarding school. My mother cried like a baby about it too, but my father had to be adamant that it was the only way to start undoing the damage they'd done. Yes, they fully acknowledged they are at fault. It was kind of hard for them not to, since no one sided with them at all. My sister is absolutely miserable at that school. She hates the clothes, she hates the rules, and she's been lying almost constantly. But with the cameras almost everywhere now, she's not getting away with any of it. Our parents tried to visit her a few times, but she just screamed at them for putting her in that place. From what I hear, this may very well be her school life until she's 18 years old. My parents did pay to fix the car. They had an auto glass company replace the windows and windshield, and it looks just as it did before. In August, my grandfather came to me and said if I was interested. He found me a job working for a friend, but it was 40 miles away, so I would need to move out of my parents' house unless I wanted the commute. I was all for moving. Finding a first apartment wasn't so easy, though. I had to get approved for a credit card just to get accepted for a studio. But I got it, and I've been living where I am now since September. My parents keep trying to contact me, but I rarely speak to them. Anytime we do speak, I just feel awkward and uncomfortable. My grandfather has suggested that they simply don't want to acknowledge how badly they failed as parents, and trying to get me to forgive them will make them feel better about themselves or something like that. But I'm not going to forgive, not anytime soon. I'm finally happy and away from them. Now that they've got nothing, they don't have me, they don't have my sister, and now my parents had to take more hours at work because boarding school for my sister is not cheap. Nor can I imagine was the party they had to throw for me or the repairs to my car. Empty house, angry relatives, and the only thing they have left is their work. feels like incredible misery to me. And I don't take delight in it, but the result is of their own actions after all. And there is an update to this story, so let's get into it, shall we? It's been what, a year now? I didn't log back in for a long time because I thought I was done here. But then one day I decided what the heck and popped back in again, only to see numerous private messages asking for updates. So I'll give one. What I'm about to tell you is mostly just pieced together from what my parents and grandparents told me. So if it sounds too crazy, just remember I'm basically retelling what I found out. Yes, I'm doing fine, but the same cannot be said for my parents and little sister. My sister, sometime after my previous post, attempted several things in order to get out of boarding school, and none of her lies and schemes got her anything. She tried to simply do nothing, but that didn't work out. Then she tried a hunger strike. She said she would refuse to eat anything unless our parents came and took her home. My mother nearly jumped in a car to go rescue her baby, but my father had to stand in the way and remind her my sister's behavior was their fault. My sister's hunger strike didn't even last 2 days before she was demanding food in the cafeteria. She wasn't allowed sweets or snacks unless they were healthy, especially since a pediatrician warned my parents that my sister, Little Miss Sunshine, was at risk of future diabetes, and even possibly having her growth stunted, unless she got her weight under control and ate foods with proper nutrients, as in no more gummy bears or mashed potatoes. Of course, my sister tried becoming a bully to the other girls in boarding school, but they didn't take her crap. One day she picked a fight and got beaten up pretty badly, when she was set upon by multiple other girls at once, and as a crowd they kicked her until they were broken up by a teacher. My sister didn't suffer any serious injuries, but she was scraped and bruised all over. Yeah, she blamed everyone else but herself. And I heard she actually stated that the other girls should just do as she says. They did not. She was shunned by them. I heard she had quite the tantrum over it. She'd gotten her way with everyone for so long that it was mentally inconceivable for her to not get what she wanted. My mother repeatedly snuck junk food to my sister at the boarding school, and my sister got caught with it. My parents had a huge fight about it, but my mother didn't try to sneak any more junk food once the jig was up. My sister was, and still desires to be a junk food addict. That's right, she's barely changed in the past year. Are any of you really surprised? I'm not. She's only slightly better in the fact that she's somewhat more accepting she's not the center of the universe. Her schemes to get out of boarding school only escalated. Only a few months there, she resorted to self-harm to try and get her way. She somehow got her hands on a knife in the cafeteria and stood up on a table, threatening herself with it unless they gave her candy and sent her home. Yeah, she didn't just demand to be sent home. She wanted candy, too. I did say before that I'd seen her put gummy bears on the mashed potatoes in my original post. Her favorite thing to put gummy bears on was food she didn't like, because that's the only way that her parents could get her to eat it. Can you imagine gummy bears on salad? It kind of defeats the point of salad, but she regularly bought a bag of gummy bears to the table when we ate. I can't even look at gummy bears without remembering. Well, my sister was bought what sweets they could scrounge up while they tried to talk her down, but at some point she slipped and fell off the table. The resulting fall broke her left arm, her clavicle, and she had a forehead concussion. At this point, even the boarding school had enough of her, and didn't want her to return once out of the hospital. In fact, her attempt of ending herself only landed her in a worse place. A mental ward for children. She's been forced into therapy and diagnosed with a heavy case of narcissism she was raised into having. She cannot leave the ward unless my parents take her out. They've also forced her to continue her schooling from there, and to keep a very strict, healthy diet. It could literally be described as her personal hell. My mother wanted to go to the ward and get her precious baby out, but she and my father got in a huge fight about it, and in that fight she hit him with the nearest thing she could grab, which happened to be a bottle that was on the kitchen counter. The bottle broke on his face, cracked his cheekbone, and cut him up pretty badly. Police were called and he had to be taken to the hospital, while my mother had to be carted away in the back of a police car. My mother ended up getting psych evaluated and committed for several months herself, and she was forced to confront her own fierce desires to enable my sister. Turns out it stems from serious mental traumas my mother had from her own childhood, but no one else knows or will tell me anything more than that. There was, and still is, talk of future divorce from my parents, but neither of them have gone any farther than sleeping in separate bedrooms so far. As for me, well, my 19th birthday wasn't that long ago. My grandparents threw me a party at a restaurant they know I like. My parents attended, and so did my sister. She was briefly allowed time out of the ward, and I could see the pure bitterness in her eyes. She sat there, looking just like before, lip curled and glaring at me like she wanted me to be on fire. She'd lost a fair bit of weight by then since she hadn't been allowed junk food for so long, and her diet plan is going to keep on for some time to come. In fact, the junk food for my birthday party was the first she'd been allowed in a pretty long time, but she still couldn't stand not being the center of attention. This time, when I blew out my candle, she did not scream. Instead, she began ugly crying. I can tell you right now that this was just more of her manipulation. She was just crying and saying "why" over and over again. I know she's only 9, but remember, last year she was 8, and demanding a car of her own just because I was gifted one at 18. She can't even get a learner's permit till she's 15. At my 19th birthday, my sister got on the floor to tantrum that there was no pizza, no gifts for her, no prizes, no nothing. Then she started cursing at my parents before trying to storm out of the restaurant. She was basically trying to copy what I did last year in her own twisted way. You can say I'm thinking too hard about it, but I know my sister, and if she thinks doing something will get her way, she'll do it. My parents just apologized to everyone, and then took my sister home early, but not before my grandfather went over to speak to them. I got some details from my grandmother later. He told them that they better not take my sister to party elsewhere, or give her what she wants, because this will not end if they don't stop for good. After that, my sister was taken out kicking and screaming, because she'd heard everything and realized her tantrums did not work. She was driven back to the ward the next morning, and that's where she is now. I have no idea how much longer she'll be there. She's just a kid, but the most stubborn one I've ever seen. She's likely not going to change until she reaches her lowest point, and until then she's going to be stuck in a place that does no enabling of her demands. No one, not even my parents, have attempted to put any blame on me for my sister's actions this past year. They've had to accept that I had zero fault in this, and they raised my sister to be a narcissist. And enabling a narcissist is also a form of addiction from what I've seen and heard. My sister has not been diagnosed with any sort of mental illnesses aside from narcissism. In fact, she's smarter than me from what I've heard. She was tested having an IQ of around 110. She just doesn't like to apply herself unless there's some kind of reward in it for her. She was raised this way, and I'm guessing it'll take years to make her better. As for me, well, I'm doing well on my own. I admit I had to learn to properly budget and take care of all of my known necessities. It's not easy to adult, but it's still 1,000 times better than the life I had living with my parents and sister. That's the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below with your thoughts on the story and the sister's entitlement. I will see you all next time. Hasta la pasta.